Hi, it's Shelley from the Westport River Watershed Alliance, and today we're going to do a tour of the dunes so that we can learn a little bit more about how the dunes are made and some of the really cool plants and some of the animals that use the dunes as part of their habitat. So we'll start with how the dunes are made. It actually starts all here at the front part of the beach, which we call the foredune. And when wet sand is carried from the ocean waves onto the beach, it dries out, and as it dries out, wind that comes in off of the ocean picks the sand up and actually carries it, and the heavy stuff falls out to the ground, and the lighter stuff keeps traveling until it hits a plant or something that's in its way. So when that's happening, over many, many years, the sand builds up into these hills that we can see over here at Cherry and Webb Beach. So the front part of the dunes, which is also called the foredunes, are under very harsh conditions. They get saltwater spray from the ocean, it's very windy, and there's very little things that can actually grow up in this area. The one plant that kicks it all off and stabilizes it for other plants is this one right here, which is called the beech grass, American beech grass. The beech grass plant doesn't mind the salt spray, and it actually survives in windy conditions by sending out shoots through the ground by its roots that send new little plants that help to surround the main plant and protect it from gusty winds. They also have two ways of reproducing. They have seeds that can fly off when it gets windy, so they can go and disperse or send themselves to other parts of the dunes. And then they reproduce by sending those shoots again underneath the sand and then sending new, it's actually a clone, which is an exact copy of the parent plant up under the sand. So once the beech grass has a chance to grow, they have extensive roots, and the roots hold the sand in place and stabilize the area, and that actually allows some other plants to start growing in the same spot. So the next plant that we see out here in the front dune, or the foredune, is called beech pea. And all of the plants that live in the dunes have to adapt to very dry conditions. Sand doesn't hold water very well, so whatever water they get when it rains, they want to keep it in the plant. So the way that beech pea does this is by having furry or little hairy leaves that reduce the surface area so that when the sun's beating on them, they lose less water. They have a purple flower in the springtime, and they also provide food for the animals that are here in the dunes by making this pea pod, which is what it gets its name from. So those are edible that some of the animals can use as they're searching around for food. Now we're heading into the interdune, or the middle part of the dunes. This area has a different mix of plants. It's a little bit less windy, and the water drains down the hill into this area, so they have a little bit more water for plants to grow. So right here we actually have two invasive non-native plants. So these were planted in people's yards as ornamental plants, and they had either come over with birds collecting the seeds and dropping them this way, or people planted them over here in the dunes. So the first one is Beech Rose, which has pink flowers, sometimes white as well. And to keep the water in the plant, this one has a very waxy leaf coating. So when you look at them, they're very shiny. They also have thorns, so that when animals are coming through here, it discourages them from walking through the beech rose or eating the twigs on the beech rose plant. So on the other side, we also have another non-native plant, which is called Dusty Miller. Dusty Miller actually gets its names because I guess millers used to get dusty when they were working, so they think that this plant looks like it has dust all over its leaves. It's another plant that has fuzzy, hairy leaves to keep the water inside the leaf so it doesn't get dried out from the sun. And it does have a nice color. That's why people planted it in their gardens, and it's become naturalized into this area. As you head more into the interdune, you can see the plants start to change. We have lots more pine trees, or the pitch pine, that we'll take a close-up look at over here. Pitch pine got its name because when it gets a cut in the bark, the sap that runs out, they call that pitch, and I guess this pine tree has a lot of pitch when it's cut. They can grow low to the ground under windy conditions, but they can get to be much larger if it's not as windy. You can tell pine trees apart by counting the needles in a bundle. So a bundle is where the needles attach to the branch, and pitch pines have 3 needles in each bundle. So that's how you can learn the pitch pine. When you look at their needles, they're actually a little bit thicker, another way to hold on to some more moisture in dry conditions, and they can sometimes make a pine cone that only opens when it's been exposed to fire. So they call that a serotinous cone if it only opens when a fire has happened. So it can make those, and it can also make regular cones that just open when the season's right. On this side over here, we have some bayberry shrubs. And bayberries have a great smell, and their leaf also has a waxy coating, so it protects the leaf from losing water. The bayberries have berries if they're a female plant, and the male plant doesn't have berries. The bayberries were used to make candle wax. They would squish the berries, and the wax that would come out of there would not only be made for candles, but it actually smelled really good too. So as you're walking, you might not see any animals in the dunes, but they are usually active at night. So the things that you're looking for would be clues of who has been in here by things that are left along the trails. So right now we can find some scat or droppings that are from a deer, and we'll also look and see if we can find some animal tracks. So here's a good set of tracks that you can see in the dunes. These look like little bird tracks. They've been running all around in the sand, leaving their footprints behind. So here we are in the bog. This is the center part of the interdune, and it's actually the wettest part because all the water, when it rains, drains down into this area. It ends up making this really cool habitat that's called a bog. And there are different plants that live in the bog than live in any other place around the dunes. There's carnivorous plants that actually catch and digest insects, and there's also one of, I think, Massachusetts' favorites, the cranberry. So the cranberry actually gets its name from the flower that comes out in the summer, and it's in the shape of a crane. So I guess it was originally named the craneberry, but as things get shorter, the longer they're around, it became the cranberry. So the cranberries do have a fruit in the fall, which is here right now, and those fruits are great for all different kinds of animals as food for their habitat. So another cool plant here in the bog is the pitcher plant, and the pitcher plant gets the name because it has a leaf that's shaped like a cup or a pitcher. The pitcher plant, when it rains, it gets the water in that leaf and gives off a chemical that makes a smell, so the insects are attracted into the leaf. Once the insects go inside there are little hairs that are pointing down that make it difficult for the insects to escape. Once they fall into the water, then the pitcher plant releases a digestive enzyme that breaks down the insect so it can use the nutrients for the plant. The next plant is a little hard to see because they're pretty small, less than ½ an inch, but it's called the sundew. It's another kind of carnivorous plant, and when it's looking really good, it has green leaves with little red spines, and again it has leaves that give off a smell to attract insects, and then once the insects come in, the spiky spines are sticky, and it actually has little dewdrops on it. That's why it's called sundew. Those dewdrops are sticky and it catches the fly or the insect, and then the leaf rolls up and they give off their digestive enzymes. So another cool thing you can find in the dunes is this kind of a fungus called Barometer Earthstar. And the fungus is actually growing underneath the sand, but when it wants to reproduce, it sends up these little fruiting bodies, which is how it gets its name, because these little earth stars, when it's wet, they'll open up, and when they're dry, they close up. So that's how they get their name. Inside here are the spores of the mushroom, and they come out to help the mushroom reproduce. So here we are in the back dune, which is actually the oldest part of the dunes. So when the sand was blowing off of the front of the beach, it actually came here first and hit these trees and fell into place right in front of the trees. So the cherry tree that I'm standing in front of right now is actually really old. It's just that it's been buried, so we're just looking at the very top of the tree. Now that you've had a chance to learn all about the plants and how the dunes were formed, you can help us protect the dunes by making sure when you're around this area that you stay on the trails so you don't step on any of the plants that provide habitat for the area. You can also help by making sure when you come down to the area you pick up your own trash, or you could participate in an organized cleanup like the Watershed Alliance has each spring and fall. The other thing you can learn more about are invasive plants, the plants that are not native to the area and end up coming into the wild habitat and causing competition with the other plants, by learning which ones are native and use those native plants in your home gardens and yard.